All right. Sorry about the cut, guys. I think the software I was using to record the first part of this cut out after a certain amount of time, so we're just going to finish it up. Um, I was talking about what you need, the three different needs you need to be writing a level 3 problem aware type ad. And we went over analysis, intuition, and verbal creativity. And I talked a little bit about that, but there is one rule here where your goal with this advertisement, with this type of copy, is to focus the emotion that that your prospects have, that your target market has, and give it a goal. So focus is important. You need to clarify it, crystallize it, focus it. Know that it's an emotion. It's a primal desire. It's an emotion. It's not something logical. And then you have to give it a goal. You have to give it something to do and basically show it that once it's been focused onto the right thing, that this is the solution that it needs to work on. So that's the rule. Focus emotion and give it a goal. Let's talk about level 4. Level 4 awareness. The prospect is desire aware, not problem aware. And I'll explain what that means. So the prospect has a need, but hasn't linked the fulfillment of the need to the problems or solutions at hand. So the prospect has a need, not a want, and not a known problem yet, but they still have a need for what's going on. Perhaps it's to continue with the personal trainer example and just to use that as an example that flows through here. The personal trainer who needs leads to get with their business or to grow their business might not know that they need leads to grow their business. They might not know that they need more sales to grow their business. They might not even be really aware yet that they have a problem, but they do have a need, and that's because they are running out of ways to get new clients, and their current clients are not coming back. So they haven't quite realized that there's a problem yet, but they are very aware in the back of their mind subconsciously that they have a need for something. And this is basically where you as the copywriter are making a judgment for them and saying, okay, this person does need what I'm selling, but they don't understand that they need it. And then it's your job to basically help them draw that conclusion. So this can be used ethically and unethically. If you're using it ethically, then you're basically just promoting to someone who genuinely does have the need that you're trying to sell and fix for them. But if you're doing it unethically, then you can plant needs in people's minds that don't necessarily exist, because it's, you can use psychological manipulation to put those needs in their head. The problem is they're going to pretty rapidly realize, even after they buy your product, that they don't have that need, or that they're not motivated to continue with whatever they bought, and they refund at really high rates. They might not like you, put you down in the Better Business Bureau as being a scammer, things like that. So don't unethically use this. But when you do see stuff being unethically used, this is probably where they're talking to their clients, or where they're talking to their prospects, is this level 4 desire awareness. So you identify the need in the headline, and then you expand on it. I'll explain that a little bit here. So the need is something that you are going to have to articulate to them in a very creative fashion. You're essentially talking to them about something that they can identify with in terms of maybe a vague problem that they're having. And the vague problem could be something to the extent of something like need sales, or running out of money, or clients not showing up, or something to that effect. Something where they look at it, they see it, and they're like, I can relate to that in a little bit. It's not a pressing problem that they're actively aware of, but when they see it, they become aware of it, and it shifts them into a higher level of awareness once they see the ad. That's where you enter. So unless the person is experiencing a problem, they're aware of their problem, like I need to get more leads or I need to get more sales, then they are level 4, because they're not aware of their problem and they need to be told and kind of like crystallized. And the best way to do that is to either ask them a question like, hey, are your clients leaving? Some sort of like symptom-based question where you're like, are your clients leaving? Are you having trouble retaining your personal training clients? Are you having trouble finding new clients? Something like that. Something where the symptom of the problem is manifesting itself, but the problem is not quite in their mind yet. That's where you talk to a level 4. So again, it gets down to that creativity, it gets down to that target market awareness. How aware are they of what their problem is and what their needs are? That's level 4. So let's skip ahead to level 5 and talk about the completely unaware market. So this is about as far as you can possibly get into your potential market without going beyond it and trying to sell to people who will never be your customers. So this has a little bit of danger to it, but on top of it, it also has a lot of opportunity, because the opportunity here is that, one, most people don't know how to talk to these types of prospects, and two, there are a lot of them. So they're the biggest market for your particular product or service, and they don't get marketed to too much for your particular thing because they're completely unaware. They're not even aware that they have a need necessarily. They're just, logically prospects, so even if this is like a successful personal trainer or somebody who just got their personal trainer certificate, something like that, they are people who logically could use your service by, getting leads using Facebook ads. But the idea of it, even the desire for it, or the need for it, isn't there yet. And so you're dealing with general amorphous feelings at this point, kind of like uneasiness, like, okay, I just got my personal trainer certificate, now what kind of stuff. Or, I'm successful right now, I'm making money right now as a personal trainer, but maybe I won't later. Feelings like that. So you're also dealing with things like secrets that can't be verbalized accurately. And this is when you're talking about the primal desires, so maybe this is one of those primal fears underneath the primal desire where, if they're prideful and they're a personal trainer and they're prideful and they want recognition and they want significance and things like that, their fear is that they're inadequate, that they're failures. And so you're basically talking about, hey, this is what causes 97% of personal trainers to fail. Things like that. Things that catch their attention based on the secrets that can't be verbalized in that market. We're going to keep going into a couple other ways that you can open up this market, because if you are capable of opening this up with your copy, you open up an entirely new profit margin for your clients or for your business. So first off, let's talk about what you don't do at level 5. What you don't do is talk about price, because price is irrelevant for these people. You don't talk about your product at all. That's irrelevant to them because they don't care. Their problems, their desires, and the features of the product are all irrelevant at this point. So everything we just talked about on how to target your target market and communicate with them is irrelevant, because they're so unaware at this point that the only thing you can do is talk to their identity. Talk to something about their identity. Identification headlines work best for this. So let's talk about different ways to use identification headlines. The first way is to echo an emotion. And what that means is it's sort of a dissatisfaction that picks people out and binds them together. So if you're echoing an emotion and you're talking to the zeitgeist of the market, where they have this general feeling, whether it's positive or negative, you talk to that and you echo it. And as long as it has some sort of urgency to it, the dissatisfaction is big enough that they actually want to take action, then you can bind people together based just on that, the emotion that leads to sort of a dissatisfaction with their current status quo. Now, if you guys look, this is what I did when I sold the mentorship program, because the completely unaware market, you probably didn't wake up in the morning and think, I need a copywriting mentor. You probably didn't think for the last week or month, I need a copywriting mentor. It wasn't something that was in your head. It wasn't a conversation that was going on in your head. Instead, what I did was echo an emotion, which is, I need to figure this out, but I don't know how to do it. And I feel like everything I'm doing right now is spinning my wheels. And I just feel like there's something missing, and I'm not really sure what that is. This general amorphous feeling to it. And then the dissatisfaction that comes with that. You're like, I've got all of this knowledge pent up in my head. I don't really know how to use it, and I'm not confident enough to use it. So using that, echoing the emotion, and binding people together with that common dissatisfaction is one way to use a level 5 awareness headline and use level 5 awareness marketing. So other ways to do it are giving words to a hidden dream. So if someone is dreaming of what they want in life, if their primal desire is lust, and what they want is a caring, compassionate partner who loves them for them, doesn't judge them, all that kind of stuff. They have a hidden dream about that. They're not usually expressing that very much. It's something that's inside them that they think about and they sigh about, maybe they journal about it, but it's not something that is out there in the world, and they're not really looking for a solution. But if you can give words to that hidden dream, then they are instantly attracted to it because they have that primal desire inside them. One of the ways that Gene Schwartz did this a long time ago was an ad called The University of the Night. And the way he did it was he was talking about correspondence courses, basically how people can teach themselves new skills at night when they're out of work. Now, the information industry is that now, but back then you would actually mail in, get a course, and study it basically when you got back from your job. And he took that concept of correspondence courses, which is around and everybody's there, but he took it out to people who weren't necessarily looking for correspondence courses, but they had a desire to improve. And that's it. Their hidden dream was to improve somehow. And he used it by talking about Abraham Lincoln and how Abraham Lincoln basically taught himself law and became a lawyer. And he did that through the equivalent of correspondence courses, and he tied that back into his offer. So that's one way to give words to a hidden dream. He called it the University of the Night, and he just took a very visceral idea and turned it into something that was really compelling, giving words to a hidden dream. Again, it takes a lot of creativity. This is one of the harder things to do. So the next one is exploiting a hidden fear. This is why I told you about the shadow of primal desires, the primal fears, because all of those primal fears are hidden fears. And the danger with talking about a hidden fear is that you don't want to be too blunt with it, because most people, one, won't acknowledge that they even have that fear, and two, might not even realize that they have that fear. It's just an emotional feeling. It's a subconscious feeling or an unconscious feeling. So that hidden fear is important if you can talk to it in a creative way. One of the examples that Gene Schwartz gives in Breakthrough Advertising for that is his Why Men Crack ad. So this hits on the hidden fear of men not being able to provide, not being able to sustain their family, and not being able to perform at a high level. The performance of men and the breakdown of that performance was a hidden fear that these men had. And the really interesting thing about that is that the common fear exists no matter what you're selling. So for him, he used Why Men Crack as his headline, and then he went to go talk about how men burn themselves out physically by driving themselves too hard and drinking a lot of stimulants like coffee. And instead of doing that, then they should do stuff that gives them easier, more measured energy and doesn't burn them out. So he went on to sell, I think it was cereal, and avoiding caffeine but giving them energy. But that hidden fear had nothing to do with cereal or had nothing to do with caffeine. It had everything to do with the fear that men had about not being able to provide and not being able to perform. So when you find that hidden fear and you can creatively and subtly weave it into your ad, then you'll be much more successful with this, because fear is oftentimes more motivating than desire, especially on these further reaches of the market, because fear is more motivating than desire in general. So the next one is leaning into an unacceptable problem by starting with a universally accepted image. So this one's a little bit more complicated, but let me explain it in the best way that I can. So you start with something that your prospect can agree with. and ideally something that they can aspire to or that they associate as something positive about themselves. And when you've got them to accept that, and accept that that is a positive trait that they see in themselves or that they aspire to see in themselves, you weave the story of your advertisement into explaining how that image is creating an unacceptable problem, which is either the image is associated with the unacceptable problem, or there is a problem that is preventing that person from achieving the universally accepted image. So again, Gene Schwartz's example is when he was talking about women, and he was talking about, of all things, body odor, and specifically under the armpit body odor. So he started with a universally accepted image, which was a woman's curves, and specifically the curves of her arm, but women's curves in general. And so they kind of got this acceptance of this is what women should look like, and when women don't look like this, it's extremely negative. And then he wove in the idea that even if you look like this, and there's this image of how you look, there's other ways that your body is kind of sort of betraying you. And one of those ways is body odor underneath your arm. Buy my shit. Like it's a lot more specific than that, but the general idea is they've got them to accept an aspirational, universally accepted image, and then they wove the story in to include an unacceptable problem that is preventing them from achieving that universally accepted image. Like I said, it's a little complicated, but when you can get that story right, it is extremely powerful, because when you create something that is a barrier, an unperceived, up until now, barrier of that person's identity, then they will break through a brick wall to get back to their identity, because that is what they have accepted about themselves. Identity is one of the things that people protect most strongly. So you never want to shatter a person's identity. If you want to do anything, you want to affirm their identity and say, but there is a problem that is preventing you from fully achieving that identity. It's very, very powerful, but also kind of difficult to conceptualize. We can go over modern and classic ads that do all of these things, and I'd be happy to do that in question and answer, and also in some of the hot seats, so we can do that. So the next way to do it is to project a hidden desire which cannot be put bluntly into words. So this one is less copywriting, more branding. But as a copywriter, it's your job to choose the best medium and the best method for getting the message across based on what the market's sophistication and awareness level is. If you're trying to take a client from 7 figures to 8 figures, or do a promotion that is in a very crowded market, and you want to open up that layer of completely unaware prospects in that awareness spectrum, one way to do it is all the ones that I'm telling you right now, but a really effective way to do it is projecting that hidden desire which they have inside them, which cannot be put bluntly into words, and using like video or imagery to explain that story and show them that their desire can be achieved. Gene Schwartz brings up the Marlboro ads, back when they did the Cowboys and Marlboro, and it was that desire of men to be seen as virile and masculine and all that kind of stuff. That was their desire, so they associated the use of Marlboro cigarettes with the masculinity that they were desiring, that their hidden desire was. So that's one way to do it in your imagery. Other ways to do it is to do videos, is to talk about the end result or the goal or the aspirational goals that your prospect has, your target market has, and just visualize it for them using a documentary or a video series or something like that. Show them that their hidden desires are possible, and then start introducing other stuff like there are obstacles and problems, and if you really want it, here's how to fix it. General copywriting stuff that we've talked about already. So that's one way to do it. Very effective if you are visual or if you're creative in the sense of projecting ideas into images. The next one is use a common resentment or unvoiced protest capture a far greater market than the direct statement of the solution of that resentment would produce. So that's a mouthful. And I'll read it again and I'll add some emphasis where it's necessary. Use a common resentment or unvoiced protest. That's the first thing. Everybody needs to have this resentment or unvoiced protest, or at least your target market that you're trying to go after needs to have the same resentment or unvoiced protest. And you use that to galvanize people behind you, but you don't directly say whatever it is that resentment is and come out against it. So the best way to give you an example of that is the ad that Gene Schwartz writes about how TV owners haven't been told all the facts about keeping their TVs fixed. So it's this general idea of, back in the day when TVs were a lot harder to maintain and you had to slap them to make sure the digital cable was working, the antennas were working, things like that, the picture was all off. They would run out of effectiveness very quickly. And so one of the common resentments or unvoiced protests was, this piece of junk isn't working and I just bought it a year ago. Stuff like that. That's an example of what a common resentment would be or unvoiced protest would be. A more modern example would it be in the internet marketing niche. A common resentment or unvoiced protest is, I bought all these courses and I've tried them, but none of them have worked, or none of them worked for me, or the market moved on before I got there, something like that. Like, that's their common resentment or unvoiced protest. And some people voice those things, and it's easy to get behind them, like in a direct statement. But if you were to indirectly spin the story into something that talks to the common resentment but doesn't directly say it, then you capture much more of the market. Because for every person who's willing to come out and say, this was a scam, I got scammed by internet marketing, all internet marketing is stupid, there's 100 people out there who have a resentment of the product that they bought and it didn't work for them, or something didn't work, or maybe they tried it and it wasn't for them, or the promises didn't hold up, whatever it was. There's 100 people out there who would agree with the statement, that an indirect statement that you could make. So to use Gene Schwartz's headline in the more modern context, you could say something to the effect of, why haven't online entrepreneurs been told these facts? Why haven't online entrepreneurs been told the number one reason why online businesses fail? Or why haven't online entrepreneurs been informed of these recent changes? Or something like that. Something where they can externalize the blame, they can agree with you, but it's not a direct statement of, all IM products are scams except this one I'm trying to sell you. Right? It's not as genuine, but if it's indirect, you can become more genuine. Another interesting thing is, that's the internet marketing market, and I talked about the TV market back when Gene Schwartz is, but if you'll notice something about this one, using a common resentment, this is Donald Trump in a nutshell. And I don't care what your politics are, this is Donald Trump in a nutshell. He has managed to encapsulate a common resentment or unvoiced protest and twist it into his own political agenda. Now, you might wonder what that is. Is it racism? Is it something where the lower middle class, the poor class, working class is galvanized because they're afraid of stuff? Is because they're fearful of immigration, they're fearful of racism, things like that. What is it? In reality, and this is me as a political science person, not a copywriter, but also a copywriter looking at the situation, the common resentment and unvoiced protest that Trump has managed to talk about in his campaign is actually economic inequality. Everyone in his voting demographic is experiencing the crunch of economic inequality caused by more government regulation, the disbursement of jobs around the globe, the automation of certain jobs, immigration coming in and taking a larger number of the jobs that would typically be specialized. And it's not immigration, it's not racism, it's none of that stuff, it's economic inequality. And so he's managed to capture that idea and capture a far greater market of people who agree with him than simply just coming out and saying the immigrants you are angry because your income is unequal and you're not making as much as you used to, and you're scared because you can't afford your kid's college or you can't afford to retire and all this kind of stuff. He wouldn't get as many people because so many of them would say, that's not exactly like me, so I'm not going to listen to you. But by talking about the common resentment in a way that is indirect, he can capture a lot more people. That's just one example. So the next one is projecting an ultimate triumph that the prospect will identify with. So this ties in deeply with their primal desire. What is the end goal of their primal desire, and how can you incorporate that into your ad? Gene Schwartz uses the classic one that you probably heard about if you've been in copywriting, which is, they laughed when I sat down at the piano, but when I started to play, ! An ultimate triumph. In this case, Gene is talking about the triumph of a man who's been ridiculed, but then just proves everyone wrong in one fell dramatic swoop, right? It's just that feeling of triumph. Now, it doesn't have to be that. It can be something like you step on the scale and it finally reads 120 when you're trying to lose a shitload of weight. Or you look into the eyes of your brand new wife and realize how far you've come. Or I'm looking at it right here. You look into your bank account for the first time, and for the first time in a long time, you're not afraid. Things like that. Projecting an ultimate triumph that the prospect will identify with is one way to get them on board, by telling that story. So one thing you'll also notice here, that all 7 of these, 1, 2, 7, are using, and there's actually a little bit more, so not quite all, or there's more than just 7. All of these are using stories to explain the concept. So if you're ever tasked with explaining a broad concept or something that has a complex angle, use a story to illustrate what we're talking about here. If you're echoing an emotion, a dissatisfaction that picks people out and binds them together, you can go back and look at my sales letter for this program and notice how I told a story about myself, right? I told my story, but you can tell anyone's story. Leading into an unacceptable problem by starting with a universally accepted image. Tell a story. Tell a story about someone who is the ideal of that universally accepted image and how they dealt with the unacceptable problem. Exploiting, all of it. Projecting an ultimate triumph. Tell a story. Project a hidden desire. Tell a story. That's the best way to get these points across, because 1, stories get attention and interest, and 2, they're easy for us to understand rather than this complicated word jumble that I'm doing my best to explain. The next 2 things are projecting the result of a problem in such a way that it will be identified with by people who would reject a direct statement of the problem itself. Similar to common resentment, right? This idea that if you directly say something, they're going to reject it because they don't feel it's close to them. If you project the result of a problem in such a way that it can be identified with by people who would reject a direct statement of the problem itself, then you can capture more of the market. Let me explain what that means. The result of a problem is something that a person can identify with because they can imagine themselves in that situation. The result of a problem. Because you can say, we do hypothetical scenarios all the time. Our brains are built for it. So you can say something like, what would happen if you got in a head-on car accident, right? You're not in a head-on car accident. But what would happen? What would happen if you got hit really hard, head on? What would you do? What would your actions be? Well, all of a sudden you're imagining what you would do in that situation. And you can identify with it because you can imagine it. Versus if I were to say, you have just been in a head-on collision, you'd be like, no, I haven't. I'm literally sitting right here on my computer. Of course I haven't. That's a stupid thing. It's a direct statement. Now that's obviously very limited. But the idea behind it is, if you say to someone, you have a problem, and they're like, no, I don't, then you can instead say, hey, can you imagine what it would be like if you had this problem? And they'd be like, yeah, I could definitely see that. I could definitely see what would happen if I had that problem. You'd be like, well, sometimes people with this problem have these tendencies. And they're like, wait, I have a couple of those. And you move them down the story that way. The next one is projecting the result of an accomplishment to attract people who would be frightened away by the work implied to achieve it. So let me go back to this one first, projecting the result of a problem. Let's talk about what Gene Schwartz does for his ad so you can have a better example from a master. So his headline for this story is often a bridesmaid, but never a bride. And then he starts to tell a story about Edna and how Edna was constantly being a bridesmaid for all of her friends, and she was getting older, but she couldn't find a husband. And you want to know why? Because she had bad breath. So buy Listerine. It's funny how he weaves these stories in because the market is not identifying as having a problem. Like, you could never say, Edna, you have bad breath. And she'd be like, no, I don't. I don't even know what that is. Bad breath doesn't exist back then. Listerine invented it. But she could definitely identify with being unattractive. Or she can definitely identify with being the last person to get married in that particular time frame. So you can identify with a problem and then associate your product, the problem, the solution with that easily identifiable projection. All right, the next one is projecting the result of an accomplishment to attract people who'd be frightened away by the work applied to achieve it. So instead of saying this is going to be really, really hard, but if you do it, you're going to make more money, saying something like, as you stare at that brand new car, it's probably pretty nice to know that 6 months ago you were struggling to put money in your bank account. Something like that, projecting the result of an accomplishment, right? I think you're probably going to really be thankful for that decision that you made 6 months ago when you're staring at your brand new Lamborghini. I feel like you're really going to just smile and appreciate the new set of clothes you had to go out and buy because of all that weight that you lost. Things like that. Projecting the result of an accomplishment to attract those people because they want the result. But if you said straight up, 90 days, P90X, you lose 45 pounds, come work your ass off. It's not going to attract these outer limits of people because they don't think of themselves as overweight. They don't see themselves as having a massive problem. They're basically just sitting, even though they're a logical prospect because they're 30 pounds overweight, they haven't yet come across a reason on their own to start exploring more solutions. So it's your job to show them, hey, there is an accomplishment you can do here. You should probably try to pursue it. So the thing with this list that I just showed you, there's 9 of these now. This list doesn't end. So it keeps evolving, it keeps changing, there's always other ways to do it. The point to really take home from this level 5, completely aware, or completely unaware, identity aware type market awareness level, is that if you can tap into it, your market expands almost exponentially. There are so many people in this blob that can buy your product. It's almost uncanny. But when you go in there and actually get their attention using these tactics, or tactics you invent on your own, then it's much more beneficial for you as a business owner or you as a copywriter for your clients. Now, with that said, the whole point of these level 5 is that they are unaware of even having a problem or having a desire in the first place, which means you have to weave the stuff I talked about, the target market, their primal desires, their primal fears, their core needs, their sophistication level inside the marketplace or where you are, and start weaving all of those things together to tell a story that drives them to finally realize that they have a problem and kind of start pursuing a solution for it. So that is the big 4 copywriting pillars. If you have questions, go back through this content, skip around, go to some parts, write down some questions, and bring them to the Q&A call at Wednesday at 9 a.m. I'll see you there, and thank you for your time and attention.